Hi, my name is Yulia, and you are watching a special series on the Berlin Wall on my channel, Rebels and Revolutions. In our last episode, we traveled to Hungary to uncover the roots of the peaceful revolution that ultimately led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Today is the day for us to finally see the implosion of this wall and to witness the peaceful revolution itself. As tens of thousands of East Germans, assisted by the Hungarian government, ended their vacations in the West. The GDR boss, Erich Honecker, was outraged by this Hungarian betrayal. He vowed to never eat goulash again, and threatened Hungarian reformers with terrible punishments. In the absence of support from Moscow, however, these threats were largely empty. One thing good old Erich could and did do was to request from his equally autocratic counterpart in Czechoslovakia, Miloš Jakeš, to close the border to Hungary to East German citizens, since they had to go through Czechoslovakia to get to Lake Balaton. No good communist leaves his comrades in a lurch, and the Czech party boss promptly closed the border with Hungary to East German citizens, who until then were able to travel freely between countries of the socialist camp. And it was not his brightest moment, since East Germans kept entering Czechoslovakia with no way of going through it. In thousands, they descended on the West German consulate in Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia, camping in the gardens of the building and creating miniature humanitarian crisis. That is when the Czech leader finally realized that he made a bit of a mistake and told Erich Honecker that he needed to do something about the situation. With the entire world following the plight of East German refugees in Prague, Honecker did not have many options. And from those he did have, he chose just about the worst one. His wounded pride took the better of him, and while he had to let the Germans stacked in Prague pass to the west, he insisted that they travel to West Germany in sealed trains. The trains with East German escapees had to journey through the territory of the GDR, where the authorities were supposed to confiscate the East German passports to make it look as if their motherland was kicking them out as traitors. Some ideas may be brilliant in theory, but flop when implemented in practice. This idea was different. It was a bad one right from the start. Instead of feeling ashamed and rejected, East Germans contemptuously threw their passports at the feet of East German border police who came to confiscate them. At every station that these trains to freedom passed, East Germans gathered to support their fellow citizens, in some cases attempting to board these trains, clashing with the police. One source that I came across claimed that East Germans were so well trained by their government, unlike their Czech or Romanian neighbors, they did not even protest against the Honecker regime until the very last days of the revolution. I think this point misses an important difference between East Germany and other members of the communist family. Many dissidents who did not like living in the GDR sought and often received a comfortable asylum in West Germany, and Honecker was happy to get rid of them, frequently selling them, literally for a meaningful amount of hard currency. In a way, this safety valve relieved an internal pressure by depriving Germans from prospective revolutionary leaders to rally them into action. Now that this valve was closed, the pressure was building. East Germans were always hypersensitive to their inability to travel, and when Honecker closed the borders of East Germany, the pressure reached an unbearable level. Huge demonstrations broke out in every major city, demanding changes to the travel laws. On October 7th, East Germany celebrated its 40th birthday. A glorious day for Erich, who unfortunately was totally disconnected from the reality in his country. Once again, East German humor describes this very well. Early in the morning, Honecker arrives at his office and opens the window. He greets the son. "Good morning, dear son." The son says, "Good morning, dear Erich." Honecker works, and then at noon he heads to the window and says, "Good day, dear son." The son once again answers, "Good day, dear Eric." In the evening, Eric calls it a day and heads once more to the window and says, "Good evening, dear son." Hearing nothing, Honecker says again, "Good evening, dear son. What's the matter?" The son retorts, "Kiss my behind. I'm in the West now." And Honecker expected a rapturous celebration of him and the birth of his country. And the entire world was watching. He brushed off visiting Soviet leader Gorbachev's urging to reform the GDR, basking in his glory in front of the adoring crowds for the very last time. Of course, he did not know that this was his last performance. Just like how he did not know that his famous lip-locking kiss with Gorby was the kiss of death, with Gorbachev uttering the famous and threatening warning, "Life punishes those who wait."
I believe that dangers lie in wait only for those who fail to react to life.
During the parade of the most loyal Freie Deutsche Jugend, or Free German Youth, along the city's grandest boulevard, Unter den Linden, they were not chanting Eric's name, as they rehearsed countless times in preparation for the big event. Instead, they were yelling, "Gorby, help us." And just 11 days later, on October 18th of 1989, Honecker was no more, removed by his own Communist Party comrades after 18 years in power, and replaced by the toothy Egon Kretz, who promised an immediate change to the travel laws. But East Germans were no longer content with small tweaks to the travel laws. They wanted complete freedom of travel. They wanted to be done with the wall, and many wanted to be done with communism. On November 4th, some 500,000 people gathered in East Berlin's central Alexanderplatz for the country's biggest pro-democracy protest. And here is where our story takes an intriguing turn. On November 9th, Kretz introduced new travel laws to address the discontent over travel restrictions. He gave a quick draft to it to the head of the Berlin Communist Party, Günter Schabowski, who was acting as the unofficial spokesman of the Reformed Communist Party. Schabowski was not present at the Politburo meeting, where they approved this new set of laws. But he was the master of vague bureaucratic communist statements. But this time, his gift failed him. The new regulations stipulated that East German citizens could apply for permission to travel abroad without having to meet any of the previous requirements for such trips. It stated that these changes would go into effect henceforth. All those who created these rules later agreed that they meant for these laws to go into effect the next morning. But the paper prepared for the press conference did not specify that. And since reporters were all over Schabowski asking when these new laws would go into effect, he hesitated and then said, henceforth, immediately. When asked by NBC's Tom Brokaw in an interview right after the press conference if this meant freedom of travel, Schabowski replied, "Yes, of course."
I'm Tom Brokaw at the Berlin Wall, and this is a historic night. The East German government has now declared that East German citizens can pass through the wall beginning tomorrow morning, no restrictions.
Soon, West German TV stations were broadcasting the remarkable news, and thousands of East Germans went to various checkpoints to see if they could indeed go freely to the West, only to find all of the gates closed. Border guards were equally confused, hearing all the news but having no specific instructions from above. They tried to get clarifications, but since it was late in the evening, questions to their superiors remained largely unanswered. Meanwhile, the crowds of elated East Germans grew every minute, blocking all the approaches to the checkpoints. On the other side of the gates, thousands of equally jubilant West Germans gathered to celebrate the occasion with bottles of champagne. The border guards were pressured from both sides, and without any instructions from above, at 11:30 p.m., Stasi officer Harold Jaeger shrugged his shoulders and ordered to open the gates at the Bornholmer border crossing into West Berlin. The Berlin Wall was, of course, still standing, but effectively it was no more. And less than a year later, on October 3rd of 1990, Germany reunited after 4 decades of Cold War division, and the peaceful revolution was over. Well, this is my interpretation of these incredible events that literally changed the world. Many other points of view and interpretations exist. Some still believe that it took only one man to make it happen. The Knight Rider, the hero of Baywatch, a deeply intellectual American show of the 1990s. The one and only David Hasselhoff, whose aptly named song single-handedly destroyed the wall and unified a great country. I am not so sure about that, but I will let you be the judge. Thank you so much for spending the last 15 minutes with me. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join us next time on Rebels and Revolutions. Take care!